Welcome to the video. In this video, we'll talk about SOFI. We'll take a look at the daily and weekly time frame on the charts, see where I'm going to add, where I'm going to trim. We'll talk about my overall valuation. We'll take a look at the options market, what's happening there. We'll look at some SOFI news. In the meantime, my live portfolio results are there. You can copy me over on eToro. Enjoy. Okay, looking straight at the chart looks amazing. We did trim out a little bit on the run up here. I thought this move was very bullish. So if we measure from the bottom to where I started trimming on that trend line, let's say 125% return in roughly 62 trading days. According to my strategy, it's time to take some risk off the table at that point. We did break over that. I didn't add back, and I suspected we might get a pullback. However, earnings came out. Earnings were phenomenal. They did so much better than I was expecting. I think we can pull it up here. 30% grow on earnings per share, and revenue came at 6.71%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for a company like SOFI, it is pretty impressive, and the guidance was great, and just all round A+ income. Obviously, we've got a really good history of strong beats here, but the things that we're talking about and the new loan platform and then tech starting to come in for 2026, it's just really lining up. I did update my valuation for SOFI post that, so I'm just going to quickly, in fact, we'll talk about that in the news section so you can get my full valuation. But for the most part, I'm kind of, it's okay, spoiler alert, to me, it's currently at roughly fair value. What I don't want to pay more. So I did add a little bit. Well, I say a little bit, it was quite a large add. I pretty much added most of what I trimmed at a higher cost basis, which isn't ideal, but earnings were so good, I wanted to make sure I was really sized into this one, because I think my valuation on this is just going to keep going up and up for the foreseeable future, especially if it keeps growing at this rate. So from where I added, we're kind of up 13.9%. So can't hate that. Don't plan on adding anything now. I'm just going to sit on what I've got until the valuation makes sense to me. I don't want to chase hype, if that makes sense. So for this, we have this strong wick down here, but we are pushing over it. I do want to stress that rate cuts will be very bullish for SOFI and many of the other financial companies, banks, and that. They're going to gobble that stuff, especially with the ratios being adjusted by Besant. That's going to be super good. They can use a lot more of their capital reserves. That's going to be bullish. So resistance to the upside, we're kind of at it now. We've kind of punched through this 23.19 level. Next level is going to be 25.61. We do have this little itty bitty volume shelf here. It's not going to offer super strong support because there's not really much confluence around it. But again, I'm happy to have pullbacks on this so I can scale in. I'm not scaling in at the moment. Support to the downside, we've got this red kind of diagonal resistance line. However, that is in the volume gap, so I'm not expecting that level to be super strong. The level below that would be 18.10, and that would be amazing to be able to add back at that level, although given that sentiment has changed again and rate cuts are more likely, I'm not sure that's going to happen again for SOFI. We are looking a little bit spicy on the RSI. It's kind of cancelled out its bearish divergence for now, but we'll see how that develops. MACDX Plus, move this out of the way. Looks great. Institutions still coming in, and flows kind of stabilized but flat. Let's look at the weekly real quickly. I don't think SOFI is going to have any problem closing the year out at 20, what I suspected. And I think, yeah, notice vests are for 20 year end and 45 in 2026. I think that should be more than possible given what we're looking at. My base case will have that happening. But on the weekly, again, we're getting a little bit hot on RSI, so I would expect some kind of cool off. Again, it's always going to be a battle between the fundamental narrative and the technicals, and we can see it in companies like Palantir. The narrative can push things really, really high on valuation. It's going to take Palantir a long time to grow into that. But we can only do what we know, and I like to be safe. I use a combination of both. And for me, I'm not adding at this level, but I'm happy to ride this one up because I see a very long-term position here for me. MACDX Plus looks good here, and Flow looks good too. So looking at the options market for SOFI, glorious. The market makers did an absolutely valiant job of keeping it under 25. We can see that strong wick down. Are they going to be successful for a second time? We don't know. Let's look at the trailing historical levels. It does have some history of breaking up higher, though. So, we could do it. We could definitely break through that. It's definitely precedence, if that's the word. But there are some quite extreme volume wanting to get this down to kind of 19. I would love for that to happen. Don't know if it will, but I've got some capital set aside if it does. So rate cuts are supposed to be in September. Let's take a look at it towards the end of September. What's happening? Shock horror. When the market thinks we're getting rate cuts, we start to get much more bullish interest in SOFI. Probably going to be the same in most financials as well. Let us look till 2026. A lot more indiscrepancy. I don't know why this stops here. It really irritates me. Probably not a whole lot of interest, but a lot of people sitting in the money on their leaps on this one. So they're going to be very happy with that. And 2027. Again, the long range on this one, it's not giving much of either direction. We've got a lot of bearish interest, but it's hard to tell if that's just going to be people worrying about the state of macro. There is a lot of thought. Even myself, I'm thinking there's going to be some kind of liquidity issue in 2026, which could be playing into a lot of people's valuations and expectations on this one. Again, if you think that is the case, there will be something catastrophic in the economy in 2026, 2027, having some kind of short side leaps on financial assets is probably a good form of hedging. I'm not really interested in that though, because I'm still quite bullish. SOFI has a very strong proven history of being able to pivot and grow even through turbulent times. So for SOFI, don't want to talk too much about the news on that one. We've all seen it. We all know what's happening. I do want to talk a little bit about my really simple cash flow model. So we talked about it earlier when we looked at the chart. My kind of fair value for this currently is 24.18. I do want to reiterate that this is a super bearish perspective on this. I've sort of taken a leaf out of Noto's book. He's been fairly pessimistic on the economy and their targets and sandbag, and I want to make sure I'm always undercooking it to be in line with them. So, anything on top is just pure cheddar. So built into this model, we've got not a fairly modest 4% terminal rate, but given the growing market and all that good stuff and the growth rate SOFI is actually putting out, a 5% could have been fairly well argued. Also, the growth rates that I've built into my model are they start at 25% and they shrink down quite quickly to 10%. So I've built into my model fairly weak growth over a 10-year period. However, looking back at what they have actually achieved, growth rate in 2024 was 27.8, 2023 was 36.1, 2022 was 55.4, and so on and so forth. So that has come down quite dramatically from, I think, 72%. However, recently, I think they are projecting a 30% plus for this year. So it's re-accelerating, which I like. Not massively, but it's going to be higher than my expectations if it manages to maintain its growth rate above the 25%, which I've built into my model. And further to that, I do a probability-based weighting on my models. So I do a bearish and bull case, and then I kind of weight them to what I think is appropriate. So if we look here on the probabilities part, we've got 50% for base, 25% for both bear and bull. In other words, the probability price target of those levels combined is 24.18, which is only 2.25% higher than the price is today. So that takes out a lot of my risk buffer. That said, like we've just talked about, this is a very sandbagged model. It just means I'm being extra cautious on this one, especially given the amount that it's grown in such a short period. I don't want to add chasing that hype. There's other stuff that is fairly well valued and has got really great prospects. To name a few, kind of anything crypto related into year end. Tesla, I think 2026, 2027 is going to be outstanding. But again, that's a slightly different thing. We can't use the same type of model for Tesla. It's very different. It's got very different growth strategies. Other than that, though, what am I most thinking will be good? UNH, I think that's massively mispriced at the moment. PayPal is still being priced for the end of the world and it's just not dying. AMD, So all those opportunities have got better risk reward at this point. That said, a lot of those are more swing trades. SoFi is a multi-year hold for me. I do plan on holding this 10, 15 years. It's probably going to be in my portfolio when I retire. Hopefully by then it turns into, might be offering some kind of dividend because they're going to be mature. So yeah, this is going to be a staple of my portfolio for many, many years into the future. And below that as well, I did want to put the chances of a rate cut in September are very high now, 94.4%, I think that says. That is super, super bullish for financials. I can't stress how bullish that is for financials. When money becomes cheap, these types of companies can, really put the gas down. That's a wrap. If you enjoyed this content, feel free to share it with your mum, your nan, your dad, your dog, whoever. And I'll see you next time.